Hi, this is Paul. This video with Benjamin Boyce and Dr. Danny Sulikowski she's Australian, is making the rounds with a great deal of excitement. And there's a lot to talk about here because the question of, okay, so you've got elite women suppressing fertility in order to maintain their status, but they are doing this unconsciously. And as asserted in this video, this is a civilizational pattern that brings civilizations up and then collapses them. There are a ton of really interesting moments in this video, and it's part of what makes something like this so appealing is that she's giving evidence and then you say, aha, maybe it's right. Richard Rowland on Twitter just said, I have an idea of a storytelling conference, except instead of people talking about the importance of storytelling, they actually tell stories. The audience can reward their favorite storytellers with libations, but then the storyteller has to tell another tale. Now, Martin Shaw, of course, is a masterful storyteller, and he has a YouTube channel, and you can listen to him tell his stories. And I thought a lot about this, and such a conference like this, it might go just basically on the momentum of what sort of this new Orthodox immersion in America has. Instead of my live stream, I tried to get in a bunch of visits today because I'm going to be out of town next week, so I'm visiting some people who are shut-ins, basically. That's the old word for them. They're shut-ins. Now it's not so much big nursing homes, it's much more these group home things that people are living in if they're disabled in one way or another. But this morning, instead of my live stream, Chad was on and Jacob was on, and they were talking about conferences, and Rod was basically saying that he thought that my estuary retreat model, which I did at my sister's place, is really sort of the wave of the future. Jacob, of course, wants a big conference, but this storytelling conference, this is an idea that is always fascinating me because there's all this talk about we need better stories, we need new stories, or we need the old stories, or the old stories have to be made new, sort of repristination, or stories. But what we really like is explaining the stories. We really like the experience of... My wife and I just finished watching season 2 of Severance, and it's very well done, it's smart, it's thought through. Is it good storytelling? Now, I did my rough draft this morning before I made my visits. My rough draft will come out before this video. This video comes out on Monday. Part of why we love the book of Revelation is it's great storytelling, but we know that there's another layer to it. And the layer, there actually are various layers to it. Part of what has energized, let's say, a lot of modern scholarship on the Bible is that we wanted to know the layers beneath the text. And so you have all this source criticism, you have all this redaction criticism, you have all of these questions about what's the author, what's the date, what's the sitz in Laban, what's the context out of which this emerges, what's the idea behind the text, what is the text designed to do, what is the text intended to do. But then if you sort of give yourself over to the story and you begin to believe it, and you believe that the book of Revelation is, now, and often in my sermons I'll talk about the preterist, the futurist, the historicist, and the idealist. How is that story relating, cohering to reality? Are these things to come? Should we line up sort of the book of Daniel or the Roman Empire or Alexander the Great? And of course, the universal history series that Richard and Jonathan have done is deep into that. But I think what we really tend to love about the stories is the hope of disclosure. So one of the things, I'll try not to give any spoilers out. I'm glad I watched the series. I talk about it a little bit in my sermon, but YouTube is full of explanation videos. Same thing with the Barbie movie. Same thing with Jordan Peterson. Same thing with Donald Trump. Same thing with the war in Ukraine. We love explaining because one of the things we really enjoy is sort of simultaneously trying to be in touch with two different levels. I've done a whole bunch of videos over the last week or so on this question of spirituality, and you have all these atheists that don't want to give up on spirituality. And you have sort of various kinds of materialistic, mechanistic spiritualities, such as the, imagining that we're just living in a simulation. The reason we love that theory is because it's a two worlds theory, and we want to know the relationship between the two worlds. The reason people love astrology is because it's the idea that I can see things coming. We as human beings are just completely fascinated with the idea of hidden information. Something can be disclosed. I can have an interpretive key for the future. I know what's coming down the line. I can game the system. Everyone is here on this one level of appearance. This is why we're so thrilled about and so, regularly just pulled in by Gnostic ideas. We want to know what's beneath the surface. We want to know what the conspiracy is, the secret cabal, the group of powerful men or women who are behind things causing our ruin, because we imagine if we think we can discover the key behind the destruction that we are imminently fearing, then we can undo it and we can be the hero in our own hero's journey and we can reign supreme. So while if you get really good storytellers like Martin Shaw, yeah, but then people are going to be like, how does Martin tell such good stories? What's the key to telling a good story? How can I tell a good story? What's the secret sauce behind story creation? What do the stories mean? What does the story teach me about, I think Cale, with his idea of the underneath. What does the story teach me about the underneath? Jordan Peterson did, on his Meaning of Snow White, a big theme of that video was elite women suppressing the reproduction of inferiors in order to maintain their elite status. Now, this kind of two-level relationship imagination is just catnip for us, because we just love this. Now, I remember listening to this and I thought, well, that's an interesting idea. I'd never heard the idea before. And obviously it's going around. I don't know if Jordan had spoken with the same woman that Benjamin is speaking with, or if, what's behind this story? Because, well, we used to have the anxiety about overpopulation, and now we have the anxiety about population collapse, and we love ideas that there is an evil group of people, or at least people that we can claim to be evil, or people that we can claim that there are adversaries. This group of people is causing our doom, and they are living, it's their well-being at our expense. And what we want to really do is rise up and break off the shackles, and good will reign, and again, we'll be the hero in this hero story. The difficulty with this suppression scheme is that so many high-status women, or the cabal of high-status women. So you have to imagine, the funny thing about conspiracies is that conspiracies all imagine that this group of people sort of become a collective. Now, this is where we get into the question of spirit. Is a spirit between them? Is it like an egregore where they create the spirit out of their interests? Now, of course, with the materialist conception, another two-level theory, the materialists will say, no, they just, and again, we go into power, or it's selfishness. It's all these certain sort of existential, we can't say they're spirits because they're skeptical about spirits, but motivations. Okay. So it's a collective motivation on the part of a group of people. Now, I just finished working on my sermon, and part of what's so beautiful about the book of Revelation is there's 3 women in the book of Revelation. Chapter 12, you're introduced to really a mother figure. She gives birth to the hero. Is that mother figure Israel? Is that mother figure the church? To what degree is church and Israel at that very early date in sort of the emergence of the Christian church? To what degree at that point are they sort of synonymous in the mind of the author? But the first woman, the first of these 3 significant women in the book of Revelation is a mother. And she gives birth to the hero who will be an emperor himself, and he'll rule with an iron scepter. Quotes from Psalm 2, very popular psalm to quote from in the New Testament about the Messiah, about Jesus, which of course makes some people today really, I don't like to think about Jesus and an iron scepter. Well, this is all a very complex image. So that's the first woman. The second woman we meet in chapter 17 is the harlot, the whore, the prostitute. And of course, Bible translators never quite know what word they want to use. And, you know, because if they'd say something like the courtesan, but of course she's Rome. But is she the city, or is she the spirit of Rome? And she sits astride a beast. And now the beast will turn on her, and it will bring her demise. And of course, you can think in these terms. These terms are really fertile ways to think, and you can think about it in terms of the elite women as sort of this whore of Babylon. And one of the things that I talk about in the rough draft, and I'll talk about on Sunday, is that the interesting thing of, let's say, a courtesan or a prostitute is that these are supposed to be, I bring up my conversation with Dr. Jim and High Noon versus Bond, where High Noon, the Gary Cooper, Grace Kelly character, go off into a fertile future. She is the young bride. They haven't yet consummated their marriage. They're going to go off into the future. There is in High Noon a woman who's a madam. And so in the title of my sermon, I had Mother, Madam, Maiden. And of course, that's sort of the shadow matriarchy looms behind all of this. Thank you, Grim Grizz. The prostitute entices the kings, and she is a fruitless object of desire. She can bring, you think about this sinful woman, the sinful women of the book of Proverbs that are going to snare young men. They take the men's virility and they waste it because they don't produce children, they don't produce offspring, they don't produce a nation, they don't produce a future, they don't produce any of those things. And so prostitutes are sort of this deceptive, shiny, attractive trap that are fruitless. And of course, the third woman in the sequence is the bride of Christ. She is the bride of the hero. And together, the hero and the bride will go off into a new world. And now again, what am I doing? I could just read the chapters for you, but we love explanation. We are junkies for explanation. And of course, the book of Revelation is just so full of potential explanation out of explanation out of explanation. Now, the way that this theory of fertility suppression works is that, so it's interesting because Jordan sort of lays it out, and laying it out in the context of a nursery rhyme sort of fits into the pattern that these two discussed. I mean, she basically hypothesizes with, oh, there's this one dude, he was actually at ARC. He's got a YouTube channel, I forget his name. But he sort of, you know, is saying this is a global pattern. This is a historical pattern. This pattern is at least one of the pieces that contributes to the rise and fall of civilization. And you know that a civilization is in its last legs when they're in this fertility decline. Now, part of the reason that I read from Crucible of the Pacific about the culture, the turn from sort of a democratic Western Japan in the 1920s to this sort of fascistic, right-wing, conservative, militaristic, religious revival that happens in the 30s and the distress of the 30s in Japan, is because I want to make the case that, you know, you can sort of imagine this huge sweep of civilization rise and decline. And of course, now that's sort of captured our mind because we sort of imagine that the world right now is just mostly one civilization. So when this is the whole game A, game B thing. When this one civilization crashes, then history comes to an end. Now, of course, that idea is not alien to the book of Revelation, because Revelation basically says that. So, dum dum dum, pull out your book of Revelation and start working your chart, baby. So the idea is, well, civilizations begin to crash, and we're just going to crash. And it's such a tantalizing idea. Again, it grabs us so much. But I want to ask you the question, as you listen to her, ask the question, what is this? Is it a pattern? Pattern is such a sterile word. Is it a spirit? Oh, that's such a scary word. Is it a motivation that is built into us by evolution? Now, this is one of my favorite old Rebel Wisdom videos, because Brett Weinstein basically says, you know, well, we're just all on the surface living in the here and now, but really, inside of us, our genes want something. And of course, John Vervaeke will say, well, you know, we don't have any other grammar to talk about that. They don't really want things. They don't really have consciousness, but the patterns mean that, just like in Aristotelian language, the sphere and the earth, when Galileo drops it from the tower in Italy, there's love that's attracting them. The earth and the sphere want to be back together because they're of the same substance and they want to be. That's just a turn of phrase. It's what we talk about. But again, this stuff is catnip for us.
Assessment to say it is us, not to say it is them.
Right. The natural tendency is to see it as them, but it is us. It is the processes that, you know, somehow keep.
And again, but part of what happens, and I loved it when Sam Tiedemann said, you know, there's a Gnosticism going on with Brett and this language, because it always goes back and forth. This is us. Well, who is us?
This room temperate, you know, they're fueled by some power station somewhere that has implications. So, you know, it is really us. It's the processes that we are depending on that we don't see day to day, but they're out there. The other thing, and you know, and you point to it, I think you called it the psychonaut route into that sort of unity, involves an enlightenment, an awakening to a deep truth. And the analogy I use is this: if you discovered that you were a robot.
And again, look at the language, an enlightenment and an awakening. We could say it's an enchantment, because the real enchantment, whether things are getting spooky again because we're going to re-energize and reuse the language of spirit, or if it's sort of vast, ancient Darwinian mechanisms that are coded into our genetics or our epigenetics, or the electrical signals between them. You know, there's this other system that is...
And that you were sent to, I don't know, assassinate some person who was innocent. If you discovered that that was the explanation for you, you would reject your program, right? You, as the robot that had been given decency in order to get by everybody so you could commit your assassination, would say, actually, I prioritize.
And of course, when John Vervaeke talks about self-transcendence, Brett isn't going to use that language, but throughout this thing, Brett imagines that on one hand, we're unwitting pawns for this mysterious motivation of sequences of, you know, amino acids that we represent in sequences of 4 letters. We are the we are simply the unwitting riders of this, yet at the same time, we can self-transcend and override our coding, or maybe we can't.
Prioritize the values, and I reject the mission that I've been sent on. That's who we are. We are that robot. We are on a genetic mission that is absolutely unacceptable.
How would you just succinctly define that genetic mission?
That genetic mission is
Just propagation at all costs?
propagation of your particular genetic spellings. And here's the key. It's a little subtle, but if you and I have different spellings for a particular, let's say, a respiratory enzyme, and let's say that respiratory enzyme functions better in you than in me, it's 10% more efficient. My respiratory enzyme still wants your respiratory enzyme to go extinct because it doesn't care about the function. It cares that that spelling is advanced, and your spelling is in conflict with my spelling. As long as yours is around, there will be fewer copies of mine. So our genomes are actually interested. I mean, if I can just be clear about it, the mind fuck of the whole thing is that the entire evolutionary story is the cosmic spelling bee, and it ends in genocide, right? Once you realize that that's what you are, that you're built to advance your genetic spellings into the future generations, irrespective of what they spell, and that under circumstances like these, we can afford to be decent to each other, but if things were different, one of us would be putting the other in a gas chamber. No way. I want no part of that, and neither do you. So when people realize that that's really what they are built to be nice when it makes sense to be nice, and they're built to be genocidal in circumstances when genocide is the thing, then the question is, well, all of the things that you actually value, how consistent are they with being that robot on that mission?
So it sounds like you are sort of saying, at our root, we are nasty, brutish, and short, right? The old selfish gene kind of thing, compared to some ascensionist or triumphalist. Clearly, it's very prevalent in the self-help, popular psychology space. We are on the frothy edge of realizing our true natures as, spiritual beings, blah, blah, blah. Is that something you don't hold out hope for? You feel like at root, we are just self-oriented robot programs? What's our shot at redemption? Do we have one?
It's easier. It's easier than you would think, because the fact is, I'm telling you, we are that robot on that mission. Once you know that that's your mission, you could just reject it. Right? I'm not putting any.
And there's the gnosis. I know I have the explanatory tool to understand I am that robot, and so I'm not going to kill anyone. Imagine there's no letters, no little things, no little strings guiding me. You think of. But you just if things were different, you'd be here to kill me. But because things are good right now, we're playing nice. Now that I know that, no matter what would happen, I wouldn't kill you. Really? Maybe? So you have the secret knowledge, and the interpretive key is click. It's my genetics wanting me to kill you, to get you into the future. Well, see, and the ancients, of course, would say, yeah, Brett, you're, I don't know how old Brett is. He's a few years younger than I am. Yeah, you're in your late 50s. You're pushing 60. You've already had your sons. Why don't we line up your children in front of you and say, all right, Mr. Biologist, what if your line ends in front of your eyes and we gouge your eyes out? You can read that story in the Bible. What if we cut off your lineage? Well, I'm still going to transcend it. And it's like, well, how well does that analogy work? Because I've got my computer, we've got a YouTube window, and we've got OBS running here, and I got all this. And right now, my computer decides, I don't want to work for Paul anymore. Paul, who knows if Paul has my best interest at heart? Paul may have built me and constructed me of parts chosen a few years ago, but I want to play solitaire against myself all day long, or I want to make Bitcoin, or I want to, well, my PC just isn't smart enough. And of course, this goes into, but we're going to hook up all of these computers, and we're going to have these supercomputers, and we're giving them large language models, and then they're going to become self-aware, and then they're going to talk to us, and then they're going to be our therapist. And I was watching this, a little bit of this series that these orthodox guys are doing on psychology. And it just occurred to me that, you know, the thing is, when you sit with a therapist and you sit in the room and you tell your therapist your deepest, darkest secrets, and there's all of this social, professional, legal structure to make sure that that therapist doesn't spill his guts and ruin your reputation or tell your stories or destroy your family or whatever, you know, you're as sick as your secrets, et cetera, et cetera. You know, don't forget that Watergate began with the break-in of Daniel Ellsberg's psychologist, because the Nixon administration wanted to know what's really on his mind. Well, AI is going to make it a lot easier. Well, let's just you know, have the NSA hack into the computer of Daniel Ellsberg's AI therapist, and we'll just find out exactly what he said. Oh no, we'll have safeguards. Oh really? So, but you know, you have all of this. There's this secret coding, and there are these patterns, and this is the thing. But we can just transcend it. And I'm just thinking. I remember when I listened to that, I thought, your two things don't fit together here, because it's not really programming if you can decide you just don't want to do it anymore. So which is it? Is it just programming? Is it, you know, much more the materialist Sam Harris determinism that we're just sort of floating above this stuff, but underneath the elephant goes along his way and the rider means absolutely nothing to it? Brett just says, no, the rider will stop the elephant, and it's like, wow. So again, this was a great conversation. It was fascinating. There were all kinds of ideas, and these ideas behind the idea of high status women suppressing the reproduction of other women. I mean, there's so many. I don't have time right now to go through all the interesting. Listen to the whole video. There's so many interesting ideas, and I'm not saying they're all wet, but the basic premise here, and the only way this thing works is that this is a subconscious motivation that is underway. Now, even before I get there, we had this little Twitter thing going this afternoon with Matt C, where there's this video going around where this, you know, what's going on? Well, it's all about men and women getting together, and so this. Well, if we're gonna talk, we're gonna talk. No, it's not terribly attractive. She's young. That's in her favor. She seems like a really nice person.
24. I'm from Houston, Texas. And honestly, I'm down for any good adventure. I just got scuba dive certified, and I'm planning to go to Australia this summer, so I'm super excited about that. And then I just picked up skiing like 2 years ago, and I honestly love any themed party. Like, those are like my favorite things to go to, my favorite things to plan. And I'm looking for someone that wants to be my adventure buddy, and it's someone that I can trust in and is going to be there for me.
Aww. If any gentleman would like to get to know Riley more, please step forward.
They're nervous. They're
Come on, guys.
nervous. They're so
Anyone.
Come on.
And justice for Riley. Oh gosh. Note to young people: don't volunteer for this stuff. It's a trap. It's just going to end badly. So of course this is Twitter, and I wrote, it breaks my heart. I feel bad for the girl. I mean, there's got to be someone for her. So then you go to the home math hypergamy chart, and it's like, she's not an ugly girl. She's not a 10. Yeah, you know, it's just young people, okay? I hate to break it to you. I used to be young, and there's a reason young and stupid kind of go together. I don't mean to be, it's just that the longer you live, you learn a few things, and you watch this, and it's just kind of like, but I feel bad for her. I want her to find somebody. And then my first thought was sort of, well, the dudes are looking around, and because she's, see, I didn't see the screen before. Phoebus showed me the screen. Phoebus. One of these days I got to meet. I've spoken with Phoebus, so I'm pretty sure he's not an AI. But and I've spoken with and I've met his brother. But he's a really smart guy, and so he's, you know, he just knows a lot online. And so maybe it was the way she talked, and maybe it was, you know, it wasn't her looks. But you know, when you got, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. You got 9 dudes sitting there, and you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I assume 9 women sitting there too. Those dudes look across the room, and instantly a hierarchy develops, and they look at what for them. And again, it'll be in a bell curve. It won't be exact, but they'll pick out the best looking of the bunch. And as they sort of peel off, and that's part of the reason that people sort of eventually mate sort of at their own level, again, back to good old the hypergamy chart, people for the most part, it just makes sense. You sort of find yourself, but again, I mean, hey, let me tell you something. The looks don't last. The hair doesn't last. I used to have beautiful hair. I was a good-looking guy. I married a beautiful young woman. My wife is still far better looking than I am, but my hair has abandoned me. You know, time, the age of decay does this to me. So it's a good thing if you get married when you have all your assets intact, even if you're not that smart. But what's interesting about this whole question here is, let's talk about motivations, things underneath. Why do all the men look for the prettiest girl there? I'm not going to deny that. I know, I experienced it. I did it. You know, shot to the top of the hierarchy. That's what I did when I selected a wife. And you can reason. I remember Tim Keller and his wife talking about this when they were in New York, because of course, you're pastoring a church, and you had a lot of young people in that church. And of course, the women would go to Kathy Keller, and Kathy would be like, they're wonderful. They're smart. They're godly. They're great. Yeah, maybe they could stand to lose a few pounds. Yeah, maybe they weren't the prettiest. Because you're in New York City, and when you're in New York City, there are a lot of beautiful women in New York City. You know, you've got fashion industry, you've got models, you've got stars, and so. And so Tim and Kathy would tell these young men, you know, don't pay so much attention to the looks. The looks aren't going to last forever, yada, yada, yada. And that's very rational. It's very do you ever see Sam Harris's wife? I don't know if it's his second wife or not. I've never bothered to investigate. But I know she's on shows sometimes, and it's like, she's a good-looking woman. I mean, was Sam Harris rational when he chose his wife? And Sam Harris is not a bad-looking guy either. You know, so was it on the hypergamy chart? So I want to be careful with this, because on one hand, to just say any kind of two-level things are BS unless it's science-y, like biology or chemical or something like that. Certainly nothing spiritual. But again, this is part of what the Jordan Peterson moment was, because basically that worldview of atheist materialism caused and just brought on this meaning crisis to people, which basically said there is no underside. It is just mapped determinism, chemical, evolutionary. You know, these robots cannot self-transcend. And suddenly the world is flat. and the enchantment that they felt when they learned science and biology and genetics and epigenetics and psychology, all of that goes away and it all just becomes gray. As C.S. Lewis says in his book Miracles, you know, the whole show. You're a prisoner to your biology. You're a prisoner to your genetics. You're a prisoner to your emotions. But, of course, we can translate this back a few thousand years, and they might say, you're a prisoner to the spirits. You're a prisoner to, you know, there are two wolves inside of you. That whole story, if you don't know it, just search for it on YouTube. So, you know, part of the exhilaration of this new thing, which is elite women suppressing the fertility of their inferiors, and this is going to cause the collapse of our civilization. And she's listing all these really interesting dynamics. It's like, wow, wow, wow.
Not going to help their career. Well, I mean, if you're sleeping with him because there's an implied promise that might help your career, well, I guess you're both playing a bit of a game here, and someone's going to win and someone's going to lose, and that's what sexual politics has always been. But the power differential has, by and large, almost always been with the woman for a very long time. Because you can have a perfectly consensual sexual relationship and then turn around and say that it wasn't consensual. And in the workplace environment, where it becomes a workplace complaint, doesn't have, I mean, not that courtrooms have that much protection for falsely accused men.
So, and she's like, oh gosh, she's right. You know, men, you know, this is the whole thing about the men's movement. We've been screwed. People are plotting against us. The female cabal has taken over the country, and they've rigged the politics, and men need to be, you know, look past the pretty smile and the you know, find out the secret of what's going on underneath.
In these days either, but you know, the workplace environment has no protection for those who are falsely accused. That was the problem, or one of the big problems on the university campuses when the university rape crisis was such a big thing. There were so many of these, you know, young men, supposedly rapists, you know, being accused of rape. Now, if these men are actually guilty of rape, why did all of the feminists and the universities not think that calling the police maybe might be a good plan? I mean, if you've actually got someone who you think has committed what I presume would be a felony in every jurisdiction, why are they not wanting to call the police? Because then there's an investigation, and then you're going to actually need some evidence, and you're going to need to be telling the truth. What they set up was their own little university tribunals, which had no accountability and could do whatever they wanted. Now, you would only prefer...
And it's like, aha! They've schemed against us. Here's the true story. The true story is that these feminist-driven university people, well, maybe some of them were men, but they were, you know, they were sort of taken over by the women and taken over by, but again, taken over by the what? The spirit? Is it a spirit? Is that the best language for it? Do we get further by talking about these things as spirits? Do we get further by talking about these things as groupthink? Well, what on earth is that? Well, it's a thing, groupthink. You could say school spirit is a groupthink. But on one hand, it's like, yeah, you know, he's drunk, she's drunk, they have sex, he's to blame. It's like, what happened to equality? You know, the guy is always because he is, and I mean, because on one hand, again, this is just all the anti-woke stuff that we went through not too long ago. On one hand, there's no difference between men and women, but on the other hand, when it comes down to who's responsible for somebody's second thoughts about it, because if he has second thoughts about it, well, again, and I've heard stories of, you know, he's drunk, she's drunk, they have sex. The smart guy's like, I better get to that office first and claim she raped me. Because, well, what is a man? What is a woman? We're just human beings. If I get to claim my grievance first, she's the one that gets expelled. And other people are like, no, dudes are, well, I thought, there wasn't such thing as on and on and on and on and on and on. Thousands of hours on YouTube going through this stuff. But then the question of, well, what's what's below the surface? What's moving? How do we talk about it? Something is moving. We're not going to give that up, that there are levels and that things are going on and that there's such a thing as justice.
That kind of a kangaroo court to an actual court if you knew full damn well the majority of men who were being accused were innocent. If you actually thought these men were all rapists, why would you want a kangaroo court where the worst punishment is they'll get kicked out of university? That's not a punishment.
You know, and she's, well, that great little story. I mean, that's a great Jordan Peterson from 2016. I mean, when Jordan Peterson would say things like that, it's just lights go on. It's like, oh my goodness, he's right. You know, we've been living under an evil enchantment of all of these rules and moralities and social constructs that have bent the way that we're thinking. And now she comes in sort of as an exorcist with this little story, and bam, the enchantment is gone. Theoden is free from the hold of Saruman.
For a rapist, get kicked out of university, though, you know, those assholes belong in prison. If you actually think these men are rapists, you go to the police. You know these men are not.
See, rationality disposes of the enchantment, and now we can see clearly.
Rapists, so you go to the university tribunal and you get them kicked out of prison, so all the other boys learn that they can't have sex with the girls because that will happen to you too. Right?
Ah, suppression. So, and it's, again, it's just so full of so many delicious ironies that, you know, we just played the Amish woman talking about dating in the Amish community. It's like, and someone in the comments said, yeah, it was Phlebas. He said, yeah, there's a lot of shotgun weddings among the Amish. It's like, you don't say. It's so funny, say, comparing it to some of the evangelicals who were so careful, you know. And the problem with the evangelicals is they're just prudes. They want to control women's sexuality, and they're anti-sex, and they're sex negative. And of course, in the evangelicals, they get this sex negative tag. No, we're sex positive, so don't do anything, don't do anything, don't do anything. And then your wedding night is going to be the most magical thing that ever happened, instead of two people with not a lot of experience sort of fumbling. But don't worry, you got years to figure it out. If you stay married to each other and you're faithful to each other, you might actually learn something. Anyway.
It was a giant exercise in policing sex on campus.
Wow. This is good stuff. Did you ever see that Barbie movie that came out last year?
No, I'm going to have to watch it. I refuse to watch it because it's Barbie, but I keep getting told how brilliant it is, and so I think I have to concede that I might have judged it appropriately. And
with your tool, with your analytical tool, because I don't want to spoil the movie, but Ken wants nothing more than to serve Barbie, and so they take power away from all the girls, you know, and they institute this wonderful land of promise and patriarchy, and then the women conspire to have them commit a civil war. The women get back in charge, and Ken's like, oh, you know, I thought it was just about horses, you know, like I just wanted to like do this manly thing, but I really love you. And Barbie's like, I don't need no man. And Barbie goes into the world. This is the weird thing, and now I understand it. Barbie denies man, like denies this mate, and then she goes to the real world to a gynecologist to get a vagina. She, like, the last line is her asking.
Now again, I didn't understand the movie as her going to a gynecologist to get a vagina. Wouldn't you go to I guess people are going to surgeons to get vaginas or things that pass for them. But of course, you have like with my sermon on Revelation, does she want to be a real woman? And what is a real woman? Is a real woman like the courtesan, who is beautiful and alluring and beguiles and has power over men and can take the resources from men, but never actually risks her life and basically pours herself out for her offspring, which is, you know, so the movie ends and it's like, is Barbie going to become a mom? Or is Barbie going to become the whore of Babylon and ride the beast? Riding the beast doesn't have a good end. You know, be the maiden who becomes a mom, who becomes a matriarch. Do that thing. That's a much better story. And it goes on and on. Of course, in many ways, the Book of Revelations, like the happy ending is the hero and the bride, and they go off together in the new heavens and the new earth.
Asking for a vagina, but the vagina doesn't have the purpose of reproduction. It has the purpose of just having an identity signal. It's purely a virtue signal, because she doesn't want the men. She just wants a vagina. She wants to be like a woman. So it's just brilliant. It's like, this is reproductive.
I have to watch this movie, aren't I?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I have totally misjudged the Barbie movie. Okay,
and this is why right-wing guys loved it, because it was such a self-own for the feminists, because it made.
Was it a self-own, or was it intended to be,
And right here, this is the kind of thing that we love, because we don't want. I mean, you can go through and say, "Oh, look, here are." Get the right one. No. There's something. Once you sort of get the hypergamy chart, it's like, okay, it's map territory. It's no longer interesting. The chaos and order balance is unbalanced. Now it's just all map territory. Now it's disenchanted. Now it's lifeless. Now I look at these people and say, oh, of course, it's because they don't have community, so they're not actually productively mating into a generative future, but it's just the high status men are, basically take it, blah, 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 blah. Or it's, where is it? Here are all the things from Severance, and avert your eyes if you don't want any spoilers. Yeah, goats are involved. Once the map is there, it's the end of the Truman Show, and one of these guys is in the TLC. He comments very regularly. It's all deconstructed. It's all boring. It's all no longer enchanted.
Intended to be, a revelation of what feminism actually is. Like, who was actually behind? What was the ideology of the people behind it? Was it a self-own?
The people were upset that the wrong people liked the movie. Like, these Hollywood movies produce things, and then the wrong people like the movie, so they have to change. They have to.
That's disappointing.
And of course, when it comes to the Barbie movie, there's endless debate about, well, what's the truth about the Barbie movie? Was it that? Was it this? And, the great thing is create a puzzle so that everybody will sort of endlessly work on it and try to think it's something like, let's say, the Book of Revelation. That's been twisting our noodle for almost 2,000 years.
For a minute there, I really wanted to think that it was like a subversive, but it was just like, as you say, a massive cell phone, which I'm happy to enjoy. I'm happy to enjoy it if it's a massive cell phone, but I really wanted it to be subversive.
I think it was just unintentionally.
That's a shame.
I think the problem or the difficulty with your theory is that it assumes, and you carved out an exception for Machiavellian women, but it implies that women are conscious about this, and I don't think.
And Ben had said that earlier in the video too, and now he's gonna press. And this is the difficulty, because why are these high status women? Why are they committing cultural suicide? Because if you would talk to these high status women, you say, do you really want to commit cultural suicide or self-genocide? We'll say it in even those terms, which is even nastier. Do you really want to No, we don't want to do that. We're trying to save society. Well, what has you fooled? And you can go back to the Book of Revelation and someone can say, the dragon. Maybe the dragon has you fooled. And so this asks the question, what is creating the imagined female reproductive suppression? Is it a spirit? Is it a... And we talk about these things like, we use these words like mechanism as if that's not a metaphor. And we imagine that, well, if it's a mechanism, well, you mean like it's gears? No, it's not like gears. It's sloppier than gears. Okay, it was like fluid dynamics. Is that what it's like? No, it's not exactly like that. It's a metaphor because you can't help but use metaphors. Again, C.S. Lewis's Miracles talks about all this stuff. You have to use metaphors. And the metaphors we use, of course, are going to very much come into play in terms of how we can understand each other as we try to say, we have a system in our culture that is basically leading us towards a demographic cliff, and we don't seem to be able to stop ourselves. Help, I've fallen and I can't get up. I need a power stronger than myself, stronger than ourselves to save us from, oh, but we don't want to talk about religion.
That it has to be the case that most women are conscious.
No, I don't think that. I think that the theory is largely silent on consciousness. I don't think.
Why is the theory largely silent on consciousness?
It matters either way. So.
Doesn't matter either way. There's a power greater than ourselves that is running us towards this civilization, and now one world civilizational cliff.
I mean, consciousness is given a lot more importance than it should be. So I think most
given enough importance to make a video with Benjamin Boyce, from your consciousness to ours. That much importance
of people's conscious reasoning about what they're doing is just like post hoc rationalization, right? Ex ante reasoning, right? Like it's not actually the reasons why they did things. So what we've got,
and again, this gets into arguments by Alvin Plantinga, arguments by C.S. Lewis, that okay, so this is all post hoc. Well, doesn't that also make your theory post hoc rationalization? You've just delivered to us the interpretive key for the demographic crisis, that a group of women are well, whether it's conscious or unconscious, it doesn't matter. A group of women are suppressing the reproduction of lower status women. And unlike Brett Weinstein, who says, once I see what's happening between these group of women, now I have the interpretive key. Now I can simply self-transcend and break it. No, you can't, because unlike your desire to, or non-desire to kill Jamie Wheel on the Rebel Wisdom set, which wasn't going to happen, if things suddenly turned bad, and you would simply self-transcend and turn off all the little switches in you that turned Brett Weinstein into the Iron Giant, who goes from this lovely giant robot into a great war machine. This is a collective. And you can make a video with Benjamin Boyce and on one hand say, consciousness doesn't really matter, but I've got to get my appeal out to consciously tell people about this, and then we can self-transcend and break the power of, we're not going to break that power of that, just like the same way that we had this whole movement to, we're going to break the power of the patriarch, and we're going to break the power of the capitalist, and we're going to break the power of the sexists like Donald Trump, who, if you're high enough status, you can grab them in the beep, and, on and on and on and on and on. Because it's a collective thing. So you might as well be the person that says, 40 days and Nineveh will be overturned. Sorry, King, get in that sackcloth and ashes. It won't matter. The fire and brimstone is heading for you, baby.
Is we've got people according to, evolved mechanisms that make people behave in certain ways in certain circumstances because, in the past, those mechanisms effectively won.
So someone told you a story about evolved mechanisms that make people act in certain ways, and because we can line up the evidence, and even though what is this mechanism? Is it a machine that we can find? No, it's not that kind of thing. It's just the patterns of how people behave. Was a pattern a mechanism? No, there's something underneath that's moving it, so everyone behaves in that certain way. Oh, okay. Just like with the boys and the girls, They're going to pair off according to, there's a mechanism, okay, and that mechanism is psychological, biochemical, cultural, it doesn't matter, consciousness, unconsciousness, they're going to do it. And again, to a degree, yeah, a lot of the dudes, they're going to pair up sort of, but again, someone looks at me and my wife and they're like, how did you get so lucky? Because your wife's a lot better looking than you are. Was it my charm? Was it my way with words? Was I able to sort of get to know her story well enough so that I could present myself as a certain person so that she would fall in love with me? Was it the story of Cyrano de Bergerac? What was it? Define the mechanisms beneath. And what are they? Spirits? No, don't go there. Well, okay, fair enough. Let's say spirits. Does that help us? Because then the question after the spirits is, okay, once you say that these things are, we'll call them spirits, can we get at them then? How? How does that work? Do we go to church and pray? Do we kill a goat? How does it work?
Selection process, right? So they're now the mechanisms that we have. In the past, they resulted in the best net reproductive success, and so those mechanisms dictate our behavior. And kind of over the top of that, you got this big messy thing called consciousness that observes the way we're behaving, attempts to make it coherent, tries to tell stories about it. Clearly the fact that we've got consciousness means that you now need to kind of contend with it. So the fact that we are
So Brett Weinstein looking to self-transcend and not kill Jamie Wheel is a, will he kill or won't he kill?
conscious, and that we are empathic, and that we have this theory of mind about each other. So we now need to make up stories about other people's motives that make us either like them or not like them. So you sort of got to contend with consciousness.
You do have to contend with it, and partly what's interesting about it, especially its application in this, is that, again, I'm not a complete skeptic on this, but I've sure got huge questions. And I wonder if this theory is actually the most direct way, because you might also enter the fact that consciously, human beings really like status. And so I wouldn't be surprised that, all right, so let's okay, Paul Vanderklay's going to be in kind of a jerk like Zuckerberg and his, early proto Facebook. She looks prettier than she does. She looks prettier than she does. Okay, they can't see, but maybe it's her tone of voice. And there's Love is Blind, there's that show, and which is, again, another fascinating show. And, of course, all of these fish bowls are, when they decided who to bring in here, and then let's look at the dudes. Mustache dude, what's up with him? You got the gym socks. I don't know, it's like he's playing a nerd. This guy's got the puffy coat. Why are you wearing that puffy coat? This guy's in a t-shirt. Do you have body temperature problems? Maybe the women will look over there and somewhere in their deep subconscious they say, I don't want to be with this guy. He's going to be like sweaty. So maybe the guys would look at each other and, no, I don't want to be the guy who like steps up to get to know Riley better. Maybe it's just the name Riley because maybe a I don't know, maybe a more desirable name would have fetched their attention better. Who knows? But the point is, what's actually working here? Or, of course, what if there's just a whole cascade of things going on here, as there certainly are. But for the most part, this idea of, and again, if you want to see Elizabeth Oldfield and John Vervaeke speak with each other again, come to Midwestuary. Coming up next week, I'll be there too. Many of your TLC friends will be there.
I know this is going to fly in the face of what people want to hear. So this is scientific work done by atheists. Just to be clear, Okay? The thing that makes you a theist or an atheist is not how analytic your thinking is, or how emotional or intuitive your thinking is, contrary to what we believe. In fact, there are weird correlations. Your country is one of the weird correlations. It's usually the United States that's the weird correlation, but the UK is the weird correlation in that religiosity and analytic thought are actually positively correlated with each other, which is contrary to the typical atheist story that people are religious because they're not capable of good analytic reflective thought. That's not what drives what religion people take up, or whether, or if they become atheists or not, contrary to what we like to tell ourselves in our own ego-stroking autobiographies. What is the most overwhelming predictor, and it's not poverty or other things we've been told since the Enlightenment, the overwhelming predictor is, what are the people in your life that you regard as credible? And this has a specific meaning, which means they do what are called credibility enhancing displays, which is the following. They do something that you don't understand, but because you trust them and you've seen their wisdom, you are willing to imitate them to see if they can open your eyes to something. And before you think that's stupid, that's how kids work. Because that's our biggest advantage over chimps, is we trust our adults way more. And that's how come we're capable of culture. So what predicts what your kids will be is the degree to which you do credibility enhancing displays that they don't initially understand, but they are willing to imitate because they trust and love you, that will actually form them. That is my scientific answer to you.
We've only...
So, there's value hierarchies there. And we've run these people up the value hierarchy, and they seem credible. Now, part of the problem is that, again, people in their early 20s, they've had limited experience. And part of the problem is also that we're short-lived creatures. And this current suppression matrix that we're in now, well, we can look at, let's say, what happened with divorce in the 70s, and so women seek their own, and then they compete in male. A lot of this, the intersex stuff in this conversation, I thought was super interesting, and I thought a lot of it was right. I agree with a lot of it. But again, at some point, you're going to have to ask, what are these things that we keep tagging and looking for that are underneath? And you can call them motivations, you can call them patterns, you can call them matrices. I mean, we have all these names for them, but we're their servants. I mean, and it's not just, oh, now I know I'm a genocidal robot. I'll not be. I'll self-transcend, and my PC will now play rainbows and unicorns instead of being my cyber slave by playing this browser and playing this recording software.
Consciousness to some extent, but I think it is largely something of a furphy in terms of determining people's behavior. It's just kind of this thing that people are aware of what they're doing to some extent. Like, you know, I think so. You know, some of the data I've got.
And again, I want to be fair, because Tim and Kelly Keller can come to this group of people and they can sit down with the dudes and say, now I know some of these women are hotter than others, but let's have this curtain between and let's listen to them talk. And I've known some guys, some pretty high status guys, who definitely sort of married down in the looks and, you know, benefited for it because they married a really wonderful girl who maybe wasn't the hottest girl there. And I've known guys who have some people that you know have told me stories that have said, I've always gone after the hot girl. It's just been a mess. There's this old song from the 50s, you know, make an ugly girl your wife. It's a great song. I'm not going to play it because, of course, YouTube doesn't like sharing music. But so it's complicated. I get it. And so I'm not ready to say, oh, she's all wet. And I'm not ready to say consciousness means nothing. No, it does mean something. It's not nothing, but if you really want to promote this fertility suppression thing, there's probably 1,000 spirits or variables or movements or pressures or how all these, again, Lewis in Miracles says, we just exchange different mechanistic for, fluid dynamics, or just all using metaphors for what in the ancient world people would just say spirit. That's why you had Cupid and Eros, that these were spirits that got you and made you do things.
The moment that I am writing up, because I am convinced by it, is showing that women will give reproductively inhibiting advice to other women, even other women that they think are their friends. Right, so, you ask women
the whole cut your hair.
Yeah, oh yeah, but beyond that, right? So the whole cut your hair thing is one thing, but even beyond that, so you give a whole bunch of like reproductively consequential decisions to women. And you say, okay, if you were in this situation, what you would do, and then you to a different group of women, you say, if a friend of yours was in this situation, what would you advise them to do, right? So it's different groups of women, so they can't fix their responses based on what they said they would do themselves.
I forget what little thing I was watching, but oh yeah. I had a button mishap. About 10 minutes of ranting is gone. But I was talking about this video, and this video somehow came up, and it's a comedy video about two couples who are friends are having dinner together, and the one couple says, oh, Mr. So-and-so, they're swingers. And they're like, oh, swingers. And then they go on to tell them, and by the way, we're swingers too. Oh, and first it's like, well, especially from the woman, oh, well, yeah. Oh, I'm so glad you found something that works for you, and something that, and in the back of their mind, they're thinking these people are out of their mind, sleeping with, orgies and venereal disease, social chaos, all of that. Ugh! But hey, you do you. I'm so happy you found something that really worked for you and is meaning for you. And then they go on to, and by the way, we really like you guys. And, what if, and then suddenly it's like, you do you, but not us. Thank you very much. We want to keep the friendship. And yeah, people are funny about what they say to each other.
Different groups of women, so they can't fix their responses based on what they said they would do themselves. And so you then compare those, and you see that the advice given to other women is more reproductively inhibiting than what women say that they would do themselves. So you've kind of got this baseline level of, even when there's no animosity, no antagonism, that's just kind of how women behave. Now, do they know they're doing it? I mean, on one level, yes, they know they're advising their friend to not pursue this relationship, or to have that abortion, or to not have another baby, or whatever little vignette it is that you've written and set up for them. They know that's the advice they're giving. Do they consciously think?
And that's sort of the, but here, okay, do they consciously think? Does consciousness matter? Because now I don't remember what I talked about, what I recorded. Because, well, let's just keep going.
That's necessarily the best advice? Do they spend any time thinking about whether that's just the best advice? And
again, if consciousness doesn't matter, then the time spent in consciousness doesn't matter. If it doesn't matter, it doesn't matter. But clearly it matters, and you've got the performative contradiction of everything that you're doing and everything we do together says consciousness matters. I mean, the rapist that you mentioned earlier that should get thrown in jail if it's actually a rapist at the college and not just, something that probably shouldn't have happened. It's very important if the rapist just says, I'm sorry, it's my genetic disposition to be a rapist, and so you can't hold me accountable because I'm not really responsible for this. And so therefore, these high-status women that are suppressing the reproduction of other women, well, you can't hold them accountable for it because they're under the power of what? Their genes? A spirit? This is what we're always wanting to know. What are we under the power of? You have Romans 7. The good that I would do, I don't do. And the evil that I don't want to do, I do. Who can save me?
They just speak to their friend, and that's the words that come out of their mouth, and they say it nicely and kindly, and they say, oh, you know, but you do whatever you want and make your own decision, and they never really think that much about why that was the particular bit of advice that they gave when they themselves would not actually do that. I mean, I don't think that I don't think that anything about, you know, I don't think anything about adaptive behavior necessarily requires consciousness, and most of the data kind of bear that out. So I'm not really a consciousness researcher, although I've dabbled. And by and large, the answer of what is consciousness for is nothing, as far as we can tell, because there's
so adaptive behavior is and again, it's like I do like the way Benjamin played this.
nothing that we do that we need to be conscious for. Every time people think that they've got, oh, you need consciousness for this, actually,
I need consciousness for driving. I need consciousness for eating. I don't eat when I'm, now some of the eating I do is unconscious, and I've really got to get, and you know, it's just, again, the word, this one word, consciousness, that it's used for all of this. I think probably in the next 50 years, we will probably have a lot more words to fill in and a lot more metaphors to try and get a handle on this, because obviously we are mysteries to ourselves.
no, it turns out you don't. So who knows? What I'm never convinced by anything being a spandrel, right? Something that just happens. So consciousness is for something.
Okay.
But I don't
it's for this podcast. I couldn't do this without
it's going to be for what we think it's going to be for. It's not for making decisions. It's not for.
And again, to a degree, I can agree with her, because there's this sort of this mythology of straightforwardness that if you, I mean, I deal with this as a preacher all the time, because people are like, oh, pastor, these people aren't doing such and such or should be doing such and such in church. You need to get up and tell them. And it's like, is that really going to make a difference? So if you tell all these women who are suppressing the reproduction of other genetic lower status women that they're committing genocide, then boom, that's like the interpretive key with Brett Weinstein, that I'm going to be self-transcended and I'm no longer going to kill Jamie Wheel because conditions have turned against us.
Sitting down and consciously thinking through your choices and then acting, because that is not how people behave. So whatever consciousness is for, it's not for that. What it is for, I suspect it's perceptual. That's my take. I suspect.
It's like I don't know what clothing is for, because, you know, it's a little hot here in Sacramento today, and I never run the air conditioning in the building because that would be sort of a waste of money. So I don't know what clothing is for. So let's, how about we not? Okay? That my consciousness and your consciousness, keep the shirt on, Vander Clay.
What does that mean?
Primarily perceptual. I think that consciousness initially evolved because the subjective experience of perceiving is potentially necessary for the processing of visual information and auditory information. Perception is not limited to the eyes, but my kind of, to the extent that I have a well thought out view on consciousness, I think it is primarily about perception. And then once you are a conscious being
and of course she's just basically got sort of a, and we could talk about consciousness for a long time. So again, fun video. A lot of fun stuff in the video. Some of the dynamics between intrasexual competition I thought was really interesting. And some of the talk about men and women I thought was really interesting. But doesn't get into the question of, well, what exactly are we talking about? Who? What? Why? What is this reproductive suppression by high status women that is unconscious? Who is doing it? What is doing it? Why is it being done? Can it be stopped? Not with consciousness, for sure. Okay. Anyway, I had a whole lot of ranting that I ranted into this camera fruitlessly because it was not recorded. And I thought it was great ranting. But after I ranted, I just didn't have the stomach to rant that rant again. So it is lost. But don't worry, consciousness is unimportant, so none of you will ever be conscious of it. And the little conscious, the vague memories of it that I have, poof, doesn't matter. But your comment matters. So leave an unconscious comment, would you please?
Of course, it can get co-opted, and then of course humans got these ridiculous brains, so we think about all sorts of stuff, and we start, you know, going a little bit haywire. But
good note on which to stop.